back again on a Sunday for Bitcoin is Freedom. Before I get started with the show, I want to thank our sponsors, Roundly X. Hey, folks, listen, Roundly X allows us to round up our purchases in Bitcoin. And that is a great thing because you don't really have to do anything different, right? You connect up your credit card or your bank card to their platform, and without even knowing it, you're stacking sats. So why don't you go over to roundlyx.com, put in the code Bitcoin is Freedom, and guess what? You're going to get $4 in Bitcoin. With that, let's get on with the show.
Here we go.
Let's get started.
All right, folks. Our producer, Nick, is always on the ball. He does some really good work for us, so I'm super happy to have Nick. There are a few other sponsors that I'd like to thank, but I'm only going to highlight one of them because it's so relevant to what I'm going to be talking about today, and that is Unchained Capital. Folks, listen, Unchained Capital, this is one of the best ways for you to hodl Bitcoin. Guys, listen. Multi-sig is where it's at, and that should be true for everybody and anybody holding Bitcoin. Why? Because Unchained, they will hold the key, you hold the key, and you can give a key to a loved one. Folks, this does several things. One, it makes sure your Bitcoin is safe and secure. Two, in the event that you pass away, they have access to your Bitcoin and it's not going to be lost. So how great is it that you have the ability and a service such as this to help you hodl your Bitcoin? Go check out unchainedcapital.com and you'll see just how easy it can be. All right, let me first preview a little bit about what happened last week. Let's recap it. I'm not getting into a lot. I'm only going to talk about the price a little bit because we went from 16,000 to 1732 to 17,088.66. And if I look at the price right now, I think it's at 17,078. So we're right about where we said. This has been a weird week, right? Only about $1,000 change in the price of Bitcoin. Think about that, guys. Back in the day, Bitcoin would move like $2,000-$3,000 in a week, right? Now we got weeks where it's barely moving anything. It's been the new stable coin, so to speak. But now, the article that I saw the most coverage in was about the crypto lender BlockFi filing for bankruptcy. And this, again, plays into what I'm going to be talking about today. As you can see, all the publications that mention that story, has been a lot of news about that story going on, beside the other main story that I refuse to really talk about because I have no interest in it. I think it's asinine that people are spending a lot of time talking to this person. And I know why. It's for clicks. It's for attention. I think it's sad, but I'll leave that alone. The podcast of the week, Hyper Bitcoinization with Jeff Booth. Now, this is a Twitter space. It's really not a podcast. It was a podcast, and I tweeted to Bitcoin Magazine, but they removed it for some reason. Earlier in the week, there was a podcast, Hyper Bitcoinization with Jeff Booth, and it's gone. So I don't know if that's because they just wanted to leave it as Twitter spaces and they didn't do it as a podcast. I don't know. That's what I just wanted to bring up to you guys. But so now you guys know that my briefs go out every day, and at the end of the show, I'll show you where to get all that information. I curate information all day, every day, because I find this space so fascinating, and I've been in a position that I can do that. So I hope through the work that I do, you guys are able to see more of what's going on and can identify trends. All right, now, this is a topic that I find near and dear to my heart, and I found myself into some debates, you can say debates, differencing of opinions is probably a better way of putting it, because it really wasn't a debate. It's more difference of opinion. As a result of a big hoo-ha we had, FTX fiasco, a lot of people in Bitcoin, especially in this subculture of Bitcoin, are screaming, get your Bitcoin off the exchanges. Get them off, move your Bitcoin, get them off, right? And we've seen a significant number of Bitcoin moving off exchanges as a result. I'm not going to say that it's not warranted. And I do want to put a disclaimer because the information I'm going to present is probably going to make me seem the opposite. But I also believe if you have the ability to safely hold your own keys, you should. This technology gives us the ability to custody our money safely and securely. However, it's a tall order. Now let's look at this. NYC stands for not your keys, not your coins, or as has been said before, not your keys, not your cheese. And I just want to read you this quote. Now, this comes from an article, CoinDesk article, but it says the powerful idea and meme at the core of Bitcoin self-sovereignty is incredibly empowering, but it has an unspoken element that requires persistent competence. And this is the problem, persistent competence, and at least for some, makes it more trouble than it's worth. Now that's Adam B. Levine. If you guys don't know who Adam B. Levine is, he does a podcast with Andreas Antonopoulos and a couple other folks. It used to be called Let's Talk Bitcoin. That's what the LTB is down there. Be your own bank and the luxury of apathy. If you do not listen to this podcast, and I'm going to make this podcast available on Twitter, I'll probably tweet it out maybe all week long because of this topic, then shame on you, because if you're in Bitcoin and you've not paid attention enough to understand the importance of not your keys, not your coins, and how to do that properly, again, shame on you. Because we've seen in history that people that have held their own keys, held their own coins, lost them. Boo-hooing, digging through landfills, all this other nonsense because they did not hold their own, because they held their own keys and they held their own coins, right? If you decide to go this route and you decide to do this, and I'm not telling you shouldn't, I'm just telling you there is a risk involved in doing so, and it's not necessarily for everyone. If you are a person who has persistent competence in technology and you understand how to manage your own keys and your own coins, sure, absolutely, it makes sense. But to scream and yell at everybody, and I equate it to screaming fire in a movie theater, crowded movie theater, then I think it's not wise for a person to do that and just scream at everybody and tell everybody, yank your coins off these exchanges because these exchanges are going under. Okay, I'm gonna dig into that because I think that this is where the rubber hits the road. So on the next slide, it talks about banks. Now, as you guys see my shirt, short the banks. Remember when Anthony Pompliano made this theme, so like short the banks, he was talking about it. He said it so much that someone on Twitter actually has the handle short the banks. That's where I got the shirt from. Thank you so much for the shirt. I had this years. This thing is ancient, but I still wear it. I like the meme, short the banks, right? We want to short the banks. Now, this was an article that was written by David G.W. Birch. Guy seems very intelligent, wrote in Forbes, right? He says this: why not just keep the keys in the banks in the first place? I am sure this is what most people want to do. I am far too irresponsible, forgetful, and lazy to want to assume the responsibility for being my own bank. Guys, crypto, Bitcoiners, maxis, are you listening? Not everybody want to have the responsibility to be their own bank. I know our ethos says, and the whole push behind Bitcoin is being yourself sovereign money holder person, right? But in reality, every individual on the planet is not going to hold their own keys and hold their own coins, no matter how much we scream and beat and bang on the pavement. It's not going to happen. So what's the alternative? We're going to get into that too. So let's take a look at the next slide. In this discussion about not your keys, not your coins, someone was railing on one of the exchanges about this. And I said, let me go look at the Bitcoin white paper. This whole concept of HODL and holding your own keys and not your coins, is any of this what Satoshi even envisioned? I want you to bear with me. I'm going to read through the abstract of the Bitcoin white paper. If you've not been exposed to the Bitcoin white paper, again, shame on you, because you should. There's no reason a educated, non-educated, if you can read, you should read the white paper. Come on, guys. It's not that long. I'm not some genius. I don't even have a college degree, and I read the white paper. Got it? So I know a lot of you people out there, college Graduates, you guys definitely should read it. But this is what it says: a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It's a cash system. It didn't say a peer-to-peer electronic cash. This is where most of us stop when we talk about Bitcoin. Oh, it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash. Cash system. Okay. The abstract says a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. This is the very first sentence of the abstract of the Bitcoin white paper. It says nothing about holding your keys, holding your coins, hodling, does it? No, it's talking about moving cash through a system without a third party. Now, if we go to the next slide, it says digital signatures. And again, this is where we don't understand this whole Bitcoin thing, talking wallets and coins and all this other stuff. To be honest, this is about digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefit are lost if a trusted third party is still required to prevent double spending. We propose a solution. We propose a solution to the double spending problem using peer-to-peer networking. Okay, again, peer-to-peer networking, signatures, no third party. And I know what some of you are going to say when I get to the rest of the deal. You're going to dog me out on this third party piece. I get it. The next part of the abstract says the network timestamp transactions by hashing them into ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. And this is what folks like Elizabeth Warren doesn't understand about why we need Bitcoin mining, because there must be proof of work that to be done to keep the network secure. The longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. We go on to the next one, and it says, as long as a majority of the CPU power is controlled by nodes. Now, if you watched Gingerly, you should understand this already, because they did a phenomenal job at explaining nodes. So as long as a majority of the CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace the attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. Now, again, through all of that abstract, I didn't get any sense of not your keys, not your coins, hodling, or any of the other stuff, right? Didn't get it. Now, there's a lot more explained in the white paper. The point that I'm trying to make is this subculture that came about around the time of Mt. Gox, I believe. Now, I've been around for a while, and as best I can recall, this is back in 2011, folks, 2012, 2013. Up until that point, I don't think it was a not your keys, not your coin sort of meme running around. We weren't talking about that back then. Heck, it was only Bitcoin, Litecoin, and no one was talking about not your keys, not your coins. No one was talking about hodling, right? None of that existed. Okay, so I want to talk about 3 exchanges, and for a reason. The 3 exchanges I want to talk about are Kraken, Coinbase, and Gemini. These 3 exchanges have stood the test of time without much fanfare. Now, back in the day, Kraken and Coinbase used to go down when every time the price went up and the price dropped down hard. I know you guys remember those days, right? We used to all be like, what's up with this? The moment Bitcoin decides to skyrocket, 500 points, 1,000 points in a day, all of a sudden Kraken and Coinbase goes down, you can't access them. Gemini wasn't even around at that time. Then Gemini came on the scene, right? First it was Kraken, then it was Coinbase, then it was Gemini. Some people in our world, Bitcoiners, Twitter sphere, are screaming and yelling at people, do not trust these exchanges. Do not trust Kraken, do not trust Coinbase, do not trust Gemini. Do not trust them. They are not trustworthy. They're just like FTX. Guys, listen, I am not about to become a hold your Bitcoin on exchange guy. I'm not. But I'm not also going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say just because SB Fraud has decided to be an ass that the rest of the guys are asses, right? Jesse Powell, Brian Armstrong, and the Winklevoss twins, I think, are upstanding guys. I do not see those guys being like SB Fraud. Now, I could be wrong. And you can come back later and put egg all in my face and say, you believed them too, didn't you? Oh, just like you believed Alex Mashinsky and you believed the guy from Voyager, you believe Zach Prince, right? I know, I get it. This is why, if you go back right after the FTX situation hit, I wrote an article and I said, who do you believe? Who could you possibly believe? We had all of the big guys touting FTX and SB Fraud, right? We had everybody talking about how great their names on stadiums, right? They're all over the place. Who do you believe? Even with that being said, I'm still not willing to be the judge, juror, and executioner of Jesse Powell, Brian Armstrong, and the Winklevoss twins. I'm just not willing to do that. And I got good reason why, and we're going to dig into it. Now, on the slide that you're looking at right now with Kraken, this is what it says from their website. They wrote an article up as a result of this whole FTX scandal about proof of reserves. This came up because of CZ, right? He started with this whole proof of reserve things, and he was going to put it out there, and proof of reserve was going to be the new let's fix everything, and this is going to prove that we're good people, right? If you're good people, you shouldn't have to go through this work to prove it, but that's what we're doing. So on their website, and this is a blog post, shortcomings and future improvements. In the interest of transparency, and this is what we all want and love, we would like to share some of the shortcomings in the proof of reserve process that we've identified. And this is what these guys have identified. So on the next slide, proof of reserves. A proof of reserves involves proving over-chain funds at the point in time of the audit, but cannot prove exclusive possession of private keys that may have theoretically been duplicated by an attacker. This is one of the reasons when everybody started ranting about proof of reserves, I'm like, guys, that makes no sense. This whole proof of reserves things, it's got issues too. Just because there was an issue with money moving through Binance from one place to another, and they was talking about this is to prove that we got proof of reserves, and no one could justify and verify. And it's one of these make you feel good type things, right? It's not really fixing anything, and it's not really building much trust, but they're going to try and make it seem like it. So on the next slide, it says that proof of reserve cannot, I think I might have, proof of reserve cannot identify any hidden encumbrances or prove that funds have not been borrowed for purposes of passing the audit. Similarly, keys may have been lost or funds stolen since the latest audit. These are problems with this whole proof of reserve system. And then it goes on and says that the auditor must be competent and independent to minimize the risk of duplicity on the part of the auditee or collusion amongst the parties. Still trusting third parties way too much. This is the last one for Kraken. It says, we seek to mitigate some of these shortcomings by engaging in respected, independent third-party firms for our proof of reserves and conducting these audits at a regular and frequent cadence. Okay, so maybe Kraken is going to prove that they're not like everybody else and that they can actually do proof of reserves in a way that builds trust and transparency with the community, and that you know that if you're holding your keys on the Kraken platform, that you're okay. Kraken also talks about how they hold their assets, things like that. But what I would encourage you to do is please go to Kraken's website, if you use Kraken, and dig through their terms of service, dig through all their information, and find out what the deal is, and see if they really are the same as SBF, fraud, FTX, or if they're different. Now, let's take a look at our next exchange. We're going to look at Gemini. And I'm going to say this sort of very, very softly, but Gemini has done a significant amount of work with regulators, licensing, auditing, you name it. I believe that Gemini would be and maybe this is a good or bad way of saying this, they're the Goldman Sachs of exchanges, right? These guys are top notch when it comes to being an exchange. And so they also did a blog post in response to the FTX SB fraud situation. Gemini is built on trust, safety, and compliance. Ask for permission, not for forgiveness. This is from Tyler and Cameron, the Winklevoss twins, the Winklevi, right? Now, let's take a look at a lot of things that Gemini has done. So, and I asked this question of Caitlin Long, then I asked a question of Mark Moss, partly in response to a video Mark Moss put out there, and he actually mentioned Gemini because, as you guys know, Gemini is tied in somewhat with Genesis and I'm going to forget the name, Grayscale, and Barry Silver. That whole hodgepodge, right? It's all to do with Gemini. Why? Because Gemini's Earn program was using Genesis lending. And they were rehypothecating assets. They were paying you a yield for doing so. And that was part of the terms of service. They were rehypothecating. They got caught up in it. They froze accounts. And now your money is stuck. That's Gemini Earn. Gemini also has an exchange. And this is what they say. Gemini is a full reserve exchange and custodian. This means that all customer funds held on Gemini are held 1-for-1 and available for withdrawal at any time. Here's what you lose in the media. When Gemini Earn froze accounts, they said Gemini froze accounts. And they're not wrong. Gemini did freeze accounts. But it's not the exchange accounts. Those funds could have been withdrawn at any time. Now, unfortunately, Gemini had a hiccup at the time, and something happened with Amazon Web Services, and they went down, and you weren't able to get to the platform. And everyone thought, oh my God, here we go. Gemini's going to crash. No, they're not. They came back up, and you can move your funds 1-for-1, right? Now, if you look at the next slide, this one's really good. It says Gemini holds customer digital assets. Now, Gemini, if you read their blog post, they do distinguish between fiat and digital assets. The digital assets is held in accounts that are segregated from their assets. So Gemini has assets, digital accounts holders have assets. These are separated. We do not do anything with your digital assets unless explicitly authorized and directed to do so by you. They can't rehypothecate those assets. They can't be a reserve bank. They can't say, you give me, a fractional reserve bank. They say, you can't give me $100 and I'm gonna take and lend out 99. They can't do that, not by law. And these guys are an audited platform. Can't do it. Now, again, I'm not saying that if something happens that it won't. I'm just telling you what's written on paper. I don't know if this was written about FTX. I didn't look at FTX terms of service. I didn't use FTX. But if someone could provide me the documentation in this type of language from FTX, I would love to see it. Now, Gemini goes on and says, at any given time, Gemini is required to hold capital in excess of customer deposits and must report any material changes in its capital to its regulator. I don't think FTX sounded this way. I don't think FTX did it this way. Now, the next slide is vital that you understand. And I would encourage you all to dig into what it says and click on that link and understand SOC 1 and SOC 2. It says, related to our licenses, Gemini must undergo annual audits of our financial statements and is subject to bank examinations conducted by NYDFS, New York Department of Financial Services. We are also SOC 1 and SOC 2 compliant. Guys, if you don't understand what this stuff is, you need to understand this because, again, was FTX SOC 1 and SOC 2 compliant? Hell no, they weren't SOC 1 and SOC 2 compliant. You want to tell you why? Because they weren't doing business in the Bahamas. They were not regulated the way that Gemini is regulated. So when someone screams and yells that Gemini could potentially be like FTX and SB fraud, I'm sorry. I have to call them out on it because I think that's BS. Now, Caitlin apparently has agreed to go on Mark Moss' show, and they're going to talk about this because they both, and listen, guys, they will probably school me because both of them are far wiser than I am when it comes to finances. Again, if you're listening to Paul, the crypto curator, who is not a licensed financial advisor, who doesn't have a business degree, a math degree, or anything else, and you decide to listen to me for financial advice, shame on you, boo. Listen, I'm not here to try to provide you financial advice. I'm providing you information. That's all I'm doing. And that's all I want to do. I want you guys aware. What do I say? I want people to read what I read, watch what I watch, and listen to what I listen to. I did not say you need to take my word as gospel. I want you to do the work. I'm doing the work. I'm reading it to the best of my ability. I'm listening to the best of my ability. I'm watching to the best of my ability. I want you to do the same thing too. And if you decide to just listen to me and go off and do something because Paul said it, shame on you. I'm not going to feel bad about it, and I'm not going to take the blame for it, because I never told you to go out and buy Bitcoin and put it on Gemini and hold Bitcoin on Gemini. I did not. That is not what I said. At the beginning of the show, I said, I believe in not your keys, not your coins. If you have persistent competence in technology and you understand what the hell you're doing with your keys, then yes, you should be custodying your own Bitcoin. However, if you are like the gentleman David, and you're lazy, you're incompetent, and you don't want to be your own bank, then if you decide to listen to these crazy people tell you not your keys, not your coins, short the banks, that's on you, boo. All right, that's all I gotta say. All right, now let's move on. Let's look at system and organizational control. This is what SOC stands for. The SOC 1 evaluates the design and implementation of our financial operations and reporting controls, while the SOC 2 evaluates the design and implementation of our security, availability, and confidentiality controls. As you can see, Gemini has done a significant amount of work to make sure they have the ability to allow you to trade and hold in custody your digital assets. If Gemini was to go under, folks, we got bigger problems on our hands, because this is the best, the best, the best. This is the IBM, right? And here's the thing. Anytime this whole brouhaha happened with this FTX deal, the first names they would call out would be Kraken, Coinbase, and blah, blah, blah. Rarely did people ever say Gemini. Only a few people started bringing up Gemini, and the only reason Gemini came in the picture is because of their earn program, which they had tied in with Genesis. Had it not been for that, you probably still wouldn't have heard the name Genesis. They don't talk about Genesis much, do they? No, they don't. The next slide on SOC talks about the type 1 examination, and it says assess those processes at a point in time, while their type 2 examination tests their system controls across the exchange and custody products have been operating over the period covered in 2020. So again, this is what you got to understand when you're looking at Gemini. They're totally different. And they've stood up, on the next slide, a Gemini Trust Center, right? Gemini's Trust Center says the events of the past few weeks have reinforced the fundamentals needed for trust in our industry, and the Gemini Trust Center is building trust through transparency. Guys, Gemini, I think, is a different animal than Quadriga CX, than Mt. Gox, than FTX, than any of these other exchanges that you guys have seen out there, including Binance, which is the largest. If anybody might be doing some shady business, it might be Binance. And I know a lot of you probably love Binance, and I'm not accusing them. I'm just saying that Binance, I don't think they're as regulated as heavily as Gemini. So if they don't have the corporate controls, and that's what we found out from FTX, is that they had zero corporate controls, and they were running billions and billions and billions of dollars through this platform with no corporate controls. Not true when it comes to Gemini. All right, now let's get to the last enemy that we all love to hate. Some people call it Coinbase and not Coinbase, right? I know my good friend Fibbo Swaney likes to call it Coinbase. Coinbase says there can't be a run on the banks at Coinbase. That's a bold statement. There can't be a run on the bank at Coinbase. As you can review in our publicly filed audited finance statements, we hold customer assets for one, just like Gemini. Any institution lending activity at Coinbase is at the discretion of the customer and backed by collateral. We have no gating for client loan calls or withdrawals. If you guys remember, they got in trouble with the SEC. They wanted to launch an earn program, and the SEC said, you do that, we'll sue you. And guess what? Coinbase wound up backing down, right? Coinbase doesn't have an earn program. Coinbase is a fully reserved bank and custodian, right? Basically. So when people point to you, and the reason I'm bringing this up for you people that use these platforms, you might be feeling jittery, right? All these people, not your keys, not your coins. Oh my God, I got to get my assets off these platforms. They're going to take and go under. I don't know if that's the case. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I don't know the future. Neither do these other people. So for them to blindly accuse these platforms like Gemini, Kraken, and Coinbase of being like FTX, I take issue with that. I'm not a person trying to tell you to use these platforms, but I take issue. How would you like it if I looped you in with all the other businesses in your industry that were acting shady and I called you just as shady as they were? That's not right. That's unfair. You can't do that. And I think it's wrong. Okay. Coinbase goes on and says, we are in strong capital position. Our public audited financials confirm that we do not have a liquidity problem. We largely hold our assets in USD. We ended Q3 with $5.6 billion in total available USD resources, including $5 billion in cash and cash equivalents. Does it sound like they're about to go under? I don't know. Maybe they're lying. And this is what I said on Twitter. Either these people are bold-faced lying or they're telling the truth and they're not going to go under. One or the other. Either they're bold-faced lying and they're stealing all our money just like SB Fraud did, or they're telling the truth and they're going to be okay. And again, at the end of the day, now, there are still other risks that you have. As Caitlin mentioned, if they go bankrupt, what happens in the bankruptcy court? Your assets might be tied up. That might be an issue. What happens if some other black swan event happens? Who knows? There's all kinds of issues that could come up. What happens if a judge goes and says, freeze all their assets? They have to freeze all your assets. Jesse Powell talked about this. He says, guys, I don't want to, but if you let them come to me and tell me to freeze your assets, I'm going to freeze your assets. That's what I have to do by regulation. Those are risks that you're going to have. Coinbase goes on and says, we have an experienced, dedicated risk team. Members of our team have decades of experience managing, trading, and credit business across the range of economic cycles. Are you guys listening to this? They go on and say, and this will be the final part for Coinbase, we've also invested in risk management capabilities from the very beginning with the understanding that effectively managing liquidity, credit, and counterparty risk is critical to the financial health of TradFi and crypto companies alike. I don't know if I've made the case for you guys to understand the difference between FTX and SB Fraud and these other three platforms that I've just mentioned. I've used these other three platforms, Kraken, Coinbase, and Gemini. Am I terrified that one day my assets are going to go poof? Not really. Am I concerned that I am taking risk? Yes. And I take calculated risk. I understand what I'm doing, but I'm going to tell you something later on that'll help with that. So let me go ahead and finish this up because I don't want to hold you guys too long. Banks. Guys, listen, national banks and federal savings associations can legally provide crypto custody service for customers in a move held by the industry. From safe deposit boxes to virtual vaults, we must ensure banks can meet the financial services needs of their customers today. That was Brian Brooks, acting OCC at the time. That was back in 2020. 2 years later, what we see? Next slide. BNY Mellon, US Bank, Fidelity, NYDIG. They're all having banks custody digital assets. If people in this subculture of Bitcoin thinks that every individual on earth is going to custody their own crypto, they're smoking crack. I'm sorry. They just are. It's not going to happen. Guys, the banks are going to get in the business and they're going to do it, and they're probably going to do it the right way. Yes, will there be risk? Listen, the banks can seize your dollars in the bank right now. Do I hear any of you guys saying take all your money off the banks? Where are you going to put it? Under your mattress? Is that any safer? The reality is that while we don't like it and we think this goes against the ethos of Bitcoin, I'm not so sure it does. The Bitcoin white paper is about a system to move money without a third party. That's what it's for. Yes, over time, the system has grown to where we can hodl, where we can wait for the moon, where we can get our Lambos and all this other stuff. But I'm not sure Satoshi had all that in mind. And I don't know. Maybe he did. I can't say that for sure. But I know that the banks are coming and they're coming hard. Fidelity, big news. It got overshadowed by the FTX SB fraud situation. But Fidelity, big news that people can now trade Bitcoin and Ethereum on Fidelity, custody it. That's big news. $1 trillion asset under management type organization, moving trillions of dollars, right? These guys are doing it. BNY Mellon, oldest bank. They're doing it for institutions, US Bank, institutions, NYDIG, and Deloitte. Deloitte is the one that audited Gemini. They're partnering to provide custody and getting other banks involved. Guys, it's crazy. We cannot, because this FTX thing, go hardcore. Oh my God, everybody needs to get their stuff off exchanges. Okay, last couple slides. What are our options then? So here are some options for you. Self-custody. Get a ledger, Trezor, KeepKey, all the other types of hardware wallets out there, and custody your own crypto. If you can do it, bravo, right? Because here's the reality. Even if the banks start custodying stuff, they're going to be doing Bitcoin and Ethereum. They're not doing your shitcoin Doge and all this other kind of stuff, right? They're not. So if you want to play with all the other stuff, you're going to find another way to, not your keys, not your coins. You got to move them over somewhere, right? Exodus, that's a software type wallet. You can self-custody there. You've got third parties. Unchained Capital is by far the best place if you're going to use a third party to custody it. And they're doing multi-sig, so technically they don't have control of your assets. You still have 100% control at all times. You got your exchanges, Gemini, Kraken, Coinbase, right? You got the banks, Fidelity. All of these are giving us the options. At the end of Andreas Antonopoulos' podcast, if you go back and listen to it, and I'm hoping most of you will, please share me what you get from it because I want to know. He talked about a tiered system, and this makes a lot of sense. We have a tendency to do all or nothing, right? Either all your money's on exchange or all your money's in cold storage. Andreas Antonopoulos said you probably should have a tiered system. There's some part of your Bitcoin you want to put that in deep, deep cold storage. Put it on that ledger, sock it away somewhere, keep it safe, keep those keys safe. That's good. Some other part of that, you might want to keep it in warm storage. Maybe you want to put it on software, put it on Exodus, so you can have an easy way of moving it from there back to an exchange if you want to trade it, if you want to do something with it, right? Then you can just leave it on the exchanges. Some of these exchanges, they do have some, and if you're concerned about them, talk to them. Go talk to Gemini, go talk to Coinbase, go talk to Kraken, see and get the real information, see how they work, and make sure that they're doing the right stuff with your assets. And then you can trade. People that want to trade, you should have some money on there so you can move it back and forth and you can trade and make money on this deal. Volatility is your friend because volatility gives you the ability to make money on digital assets. And then you have, of course, your banks, and that's active. So you can put it in the bank. Again, Andreas Antonopoulos, that's his Twitter handle. You guys should follow him. Really good guy. So let me finish up by saying this. I've told you guys many times before, and I want you to keep thinking about this. Who and what you listen to can heavily influence your financial future. Who and what you listen to. If you hastily go move your keys, not your coins, you're going to find, and then you forget where your keys are or something like that, or be like the Chinese company that didn't write down the mnemonic key the right way, and they probably misspelled the word, and now they don't know what the hell it is. And guess what? $42 million gone. Poof. Not your keys, not your coins. Be careful, people. Persistent competence. If you're persistently competent with this technology, have a ball. Be the not your keys, not your coin. Be the self-sovereign individual that you was meant to be. But if you are not there, please do not make these hasty decisions just because someone's screaming and yelling at you that guess what? All exchanges are going to fail and they're all going to crash. This is the same situation we had with Mt. Gox when Mt. Gox blew up. It's amazing that we still had Coinbase, Kraken, and Gemini surface after that because at that time, everyone was like, fuck this. I'm not leaving my Bitcoin on an exchange, right? We went through that phase and we're back. Andreas Antonopoulos said the pendulum will swing. It will continue to swing. Something will happen. Everyone will try to move their stuff off. Something will happen and everyone will move it back on. And the pendulum swings back and forth. All right, guys. I hope this was enlightening. I know I can be intense at times when I talk about some of these things, but that's because some of this stuff riles me up and it gets me really going. And I don't want to, I just don't like people saying things that shouldn't be said like that. Gemini, Kraken, and Coinbase. I hope you guys are doing what you have to do, and I hope you guys are keeping people safe. You guys know where to find me. Listen, the cryptocurator.com is my website. You can visit that every day. I try to put on there the top 3 most covered articles of the day. They're not the biggest. They're just the top 3 most covered. I put a podcast and a video, sometimes 2 videos, only 1 podcast, and some other information that you guys should really dig into and listen to. There is a link at the very top, which is my daily brief, which I put all the stuff from the top 10 digital assets, any news about those, I curate those on there for you guys to see. And again, the reason that I do this is because I want you guys to have the ability to understand what's going on from a trusted source. So I wanted you guys to say, listen, this guy's been around since 2011. He's been paying attention to this stuff. Obviously, he sort of knows what's going on. And I do have some idea. I'm not the smartest tool, sharpest tool in the shed. I'm not the best presenter. I'm not the best guy that understands all this stuff to the nth degree. But I'm someone who's paid attention enough that I know what the hell's going on. And if you want to know what the hell's going on, if you read, watch, and listen, what I read, watch, and listen, it's going to give you a pretty good idea. So with that, I'm going to thank my wonderful producer, Nick, for putting this together. I'm going to thank Round the X once again for making it possible that I can have such a little beautiful presentation. And I hope that you guys have a great Sunday. My Cowboys play tonight against the Colts. Watch them, root them on. Go Cowboys. You guys have a good day. Bye.